So now you're going to be ready to make the allocation chart. On this chart, you will allocate the hours that the high carriers were worked while they were already above the average, which should have been given to the low carriers. Part of management making every effort to distribute overtime hours and opportunities equitably. We can't just pay everybody up to the average. Although that may have been agreed to in your offices in the past, it's not the contractual remedy. The method I am going to show you works every single time. Now, this is what the allocation chart looks like. As you can see, you put the office name, the quarter you are working on, the correct equitability average. Again, this will always be the average you found for yourself using the data from the overtime alert report. You're going to write what month you are working on. In this case, in our example being quarter 1, 2023, you would start from March 31st backwards towards the beginning of the quarter. You always start with the last day of the quarter and allocate overtime backwards. So first, look at each low carrier. Start with the lowest one. That was at work the most within the last 2 weeks of the quarter. That is key. The lowest one that was at work the most during the last 2 weeks of the quarter. Now, why during the last 2 weeks? See, because the further you move backwards or forward towards the beginning of the quarter, in this case, the weaker your argument becomes. Remember, management has the entire quarter to make everybody equitable. What happens if a low carrier is off the last 3 weeks? Well, management could easily argue they would have given that carrier more overtime, couldn't they? Well, we would have if they were just here at work. We're still going to allocate overtime to the carriers absent the last few weeks of the quarter. But we're going to start with the lowest hanging fruit first and then work our way up the tree to the farther away fruit, or the letter carriers that were absent the last few weeks of the quarter. So as you can see in this chart, Jay Chan was absent or unavailable from about March 29th all the way to March 15th. So I choose A. Gafoor as my first carrier to make whole. Now, this is a chart that I created. Of course, it's based on the guidance we had from a very old agreement called Working Together from the late 90s, early 90s in the Pacific area. And it has been lauded by many advocates as one of the most thorough charts that they have seen. So what I'm showing you here today, like I said, works every time. Of course, there's many other variations of the allocation chart that you can use to allocate overtime. So let's start allocating. This chart will be used along with the overtime alert report. I look at the first date in the quarter and see if, for example, Mr. Gafoor was maximized. Seeing he wasn't on March 31st, 2023. For us, remember, the first day we're looking at is the last day of the quarter and then moving backwards. On this day, he worked 11.06 hours. I then look at the high carriers, those that ended with hours above the average. And I see that Z Lin worked 12 hours on the same day. You see that? I then take the 0.94 hours from Z Lin and I allocate it to Gafoor. You see that on March 31st, 2023. What is the whole process? Well, I subtract 0.94 from the total number of hours Z Lin has for the quarter. I write it in the new total that Z Lin now would have if that 0.94 would have been allocated to Gafoor. So you see, we take that 0.94 away, We subtract it from the total hours Lynn has, and we add it to Gafoor. That leaves Z-Lin with 319 hours. You can never bring the high carriers lower than the average, and you can't bring the low carriers higher than the average. So, of course, some people are always going to have more overtime hours at the end of the quarter, and some are always going to have less. Our goal is to make them equitable, not equal. Let's go to the next day. On March 30th, 2023, again, Mr. Gafoor was not maximized. You see, he worked 11 hours. I then look at the high carriers that worked on March 30th. Z-Lin again worked overtime in the amount of 3.26 hours on the same day. I take 1 hour away from Z-Lin and allocate it to Gafoor. Why only one? Because we cannot bring Gafoor over 12 hours. That is the contractual limit outside of the month of December. So now you see that 1 hour is subtracted from Z-Lin, and we write in the new total for Z-Lin as if that hour had been actually given to Gafoor. That would have left Z-Lin with 318 hours. Let's look at a third example. On March 14th, Jay Chan was not ordered in. He was left at home. Is there anything we can do? Of course. On this day, high carrier S. Dangle worked 11 hours. So I have allocated the 11 hours to Jay Chan. You see that on March 30th, I allocated 2.83 hours from Dangle to Chan. And after deducting that, Dangle was left with 321.89 hours. So it really is a running total. So now, after subtracting the 11 hours, Dangle is left with 310.89 hours. Now, I know it's a little confusing. Takes some getting used to. After you do this for an entire quarter, maybe a couple quarters, you will be a pro.